Hey guys, and welcome to one of my first streams here on my platform. I usually use the Mostly Peaceful Latinas, but I'm trying to build my own YouTube. And today I have a guest that I've been dying to talk to, Jay Beecher. He is a journalist from the UK who's actually in Ukraine. And the way that I found him was on the crazy world of X or Twitter. And, you know, the Epstein situation has been a little bit convoluted, in my opinion, highly fictional, and just almost like a Disney sort of movie. And he's one of the people that I saw kind of pushing back on the mainstream narrative. And so we start talking, I start following him, and him and I have a lot of the same information when it comes to this case, where there are aspects of truth, right? Jeffrey Epstein was caught soliciting minors, and then there's aspects of fiction. And so today he actually just released a book in this entire matter. He's interviewed key witnesses, including, I believe, Virginia Roberts' ex-boyfriend. And he has so much information that he's been collecting for the last 5 years that, in my opinion, pretty much debunks the myth of Epstein. So, Jay, I just want to introduce you to my audience. How are you?
Thanks for having me. Thanks very much.
Of course. So tell us how you started in this world of Epstein.
So it was by mistake, really. I was covering politics and crime, mainly centre-right politics. I was involved in politics before, and then I moved across into crime because it's interested me. And I have a background of being trained there were two Scotland Yard detectives. So I applied the interview techniques to my journalism. And I started writing a very basic piece about Virginia Giuffre. And it was just believing her, basically. Why wouldn't you? You know, this was
right.
Sorry for her. I felt sorry for the victims. And I thought this is a terrible story about a really sleazy paedophile. And I got into the second paragraph, and then I realized I always like to fact check things. That's the problem. Right. Journalists don't seem to care about any of that anymore.
Yeah.
So they're not real journalists. So I fact checked, and I didn't get past that second paragraph, and I realized that she'd admitted that this was a mistake. This part she'd lied, etc., etc. So what should have been a very basic article has turned into 5 years. I released a report. It was about 200 pages, just listing all of her contradictions and then demonstrable lies with all the proof, all the links, all the evidence. And that went quite viral. People hadn't really challenged it. I then instantly got attacked. They used my background, saying, "Oh, he was a campaign manager for Brexit and all this lot to try and brand me as far right." They did everything to discredit. So I said, "Well, you can do what you want, but it doesn't deter from the truth." So I just carried on. I ended up traveling, even up until recently, traveling the world really, Amsterdam, America, England, all over, and interviewing key witnesses. So I've interviewed Mark Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell.
Just for reference, that would be Jeffrey Epstein's brother that you've interviewed, and also Ghislaine Maxwell's brother.
Yeah, Ghislaine Maxwell's brother. Yeah, I wanted to do something that the journalists hadn't done. I wanted to not just cover one side of the story. I wanted to cover both. And then that's the only way you'll get to the truth. Just like if there was if there was a crime, this is a criminal case. You have to get the evidence from both sides to determine what is the truth. But the media don't do that. So they've only portrayed these stories and accusations without any balance or anything.
Right. And that's the word. There hasn't been any balance.
Yeah.
And part of the reason why that is because who isn't enticed, or who isn't, he's not curious about these conspiracies, especially when there's so many elements that make it makes it more like it could be true. The pictures with Bill Clinton, pictures with Donald Trump, so the most powerful man in the United States, obviously Prince Andrew, or in the world, Prince Andrew being someone else that we would always see Jeffrey Epstein with. The fact that he had all these houses, the island with the weird temple, it's just, to me, it had the perfect elements for this story, right?
It's made for television. It's made for a movie. Yeah,
so
even
perfect.
Ian Maxwell said that to me in one of the interviews.
Yeah.
He said this has sex, it has
Right.
suicide, it has this, it has that, it has prostitution, it has child trafficking, it has everything.
Extreme amount of wealth everywhere. It's just
yeah, definitely. Yeah, exactly. But what I found out, and it was honestly, I've done everything I can. I've left no stone unturned. I've read every single document there is, and there are thousands and thousands of pages. You know, right? They've released. When people say about these Epstein files, they've already you've got some. I know you've looked into them too. They've already been releasing these files for years.
200 of them, by the way, have been released through the years, and a lot of people don't know that. We keep saying we would release the files, and it's like there has been so many files released, so many important files that have detailed witness testimony and evidence. And I think the most important one that nobody wants to touch on is the one that I read that I showed you earlier. I still have it printed here. 167 pages, I think, of the grand jury testimony from the first case back in 2006, I think. And this was released thanks to Governor DeSantis in Florida. He signed a law because this was with the courts, right? The courts. There's also certain documents like this one, which could only be released by the courts, not the FBI, not the DOJ, not Donald Trump, not anyone, not even the governor. But what happened is he signed a law that because Jeffrey Epstein's dead, because seems to protect key witnesses and stuff like that, then it could be released, and it was released, but it didn't fit the narrative that
people want a client list. So the timeline's really important. None of this story would have happened if it weren't for the Me Too movement and conspiracy theories like QAnon and Pizzagate. They both at exactly the same time. And actually, if you look into it, so this client list is a myth. It's a complete myth. And that's what people want. They won't be satisfied. You could release everything. You could release millions of pages. They will not be satisfied until this list is released, but it won't be released because it doesn't exist. And that happened. So with regards to the Me Too movement, as you know, obviously kicked off and did some great things at first, but then sort of spiraled into a witch hunt because they went by this really flawed notion that you have to believe all women. Well, women, just like men, lie sometimes. Some people lie. It's not your character isn't defined by your sex. Some people tell the truth. Some people lie. Some people make up rape allegations. It happens every year, and there are people who commit suicide because they've been falsely accused. And so you had the Me Too movement kicking off. Then you had obviously Donald Trump's election. People trying to stop Donald Trump from coming to power. So then they would throw in, did you know he was friends with Jeffrey Epstein? And then you had Virginia Giuffre suddenly tweeting out QAnon slogans in her tweets. So, where we go one, we go all. She would put hashtag QAnon. She wasn't getting as much attention as she wanted. So she actually started feeding these stories. She was also contacted by a Daily Mail or a Mail on Sunday journalist, Sharon Churcher, who said, let's write a book. Maybe you can name some names. Gave her names to mention, even though she'd never met some of these people. And it spiraled from there. So if you actually look into it and people say, who were these people trafficked to? Well, none of them have actually said that they were trafficked to anyone. The only person who claimed that she was trafficked to anyone famous or other than Jeffrey Epstein was Virginia Giuffre. None of the victims in the police reports who were at Ghislaine Maxwell's trial, none of them said that they were trafficked to anyone who was famous or any politician.
So we're covering the timeline, which is Me Too movement, the QAnon movement, and the first term comes around. I don't know how much you know about this, and I'm sure you do, but to our viewers and listeners, there is a journalist by the name of Julie Brown at the Miami Herald. Now, the Miami Herald's one of the most corrupt newspaper, whatever you want to call it, media outlets in the entire country. I'm in Miami. I see it every day, how unfair they are. And Julie Brown, she has tweets, and I have screenshots of it in case she wants to delete them, because she says in her own words that her motivation for starting this case again, right, was the Donald Trump election. Because someone, I forgot the name of the alleged victim, some woman had said that Donald Trump raped her at a Jeffrey Epstein party when she was only 13 years old.
Yeah.
And so Julie Brown, wanting to hurt Donald Trump during the election, decided to cover the case, or to start covering the case again, because we have to go back to 2004. I think this is when 2004 or something like that, when this first happened.
So I can take you through the timeline. Because of this 5-year investigation, I've been able to piece everything together. I've even listened to depositions that aren't public yet with Virginia Giuffre. Everything fits into place. And this is a story of Jeffrey Epstein was portraying that he wanted to be like a Hugh Hefner type of guy.
Right.
And he was, a very rich man, very arrogant, very seedy, but he was only with 20-year-olds, some 30-year-olds, etc. No minors. Then that changed because he was constantly having them over to his island. A lot of them were escorts, and that's exactly
models, which a lot of models are escorts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And every single accuser who I've interviewed has said that they were offered, I don't know, like money for this, or they wanted to do this course, and he would fund that, but then they would have to do this in return, which is escorting, as escorting. And they hired other girls, etc. That wasn't trafficking because they were all overage. So, yeah, sleazy, nothing illegal. It's no sleazier than a Hugh Hefner in his Playboy mansion, paying these girls to do that. However, when it changed, and this is what's completely crazy about this whole case, is when Virginia came onto the scene. Because whereas these girls knew that they could make money by finding other girls for Epstein, and went out and found 20-year-olds, just like all their friends, she decided to go out, find young girls, underage girls, minors, children, and even went to schools to do this, and has admitted to doing this. This is
by the way, in these documents, in the release of the Epstein files here in Florida, that is exactly word for word what the women say, that they were recruited by the popular girl, right?
Exactly.
And they black out the names, but you obviously know that it's her. And there's another girl, maybe you know her name better, but they talk about lying about their age.
Yeah.
Virginia tells them to not say their real age. It's just very obvious that, not to excuse Jeffrey Epstein, that he didn't even know that a lot of these women were under the age of 18.
And he took a lie detector test, and the media don't report that. The police did ask him, "Will you take a lie detector test?" He said, "Yeah." He took a lie detector test. They said, "Did you know that these girls were underage?" He said no, and he passed the test. And so people say, why did he not? They call it a sweetheart deal, that he got off easy.
Right, sweetheart deal.
Yeah, but he actually didn't, because what had happened was it was Haley Robson who recruited these girls, but Virginia had recruited Haley Robson.
Okay. Haley Robinson.
Yeah, so Haley Robson, and then Haley Robson copied what Virginia was doing and would tell them to lie about their ages, because she thought that was normal, because Virginia taught her how to do it. Virginia was a madam, she was essentially the madam and the child trafficker. And so Haley Robson met different girls. One of them was Sage Gonzalez. And this girl, she was 14. Haley Robson took her to Jeffrey Epstein's mansion. Sexual encounter took place, and then the next day, this girl Sage goes into school with money, and then people ask questions, and it all blows out. He gets arrested, and then they find out that before that, this had been happening for a while, starting with Virginia. So it all started with Virginia Giuffre choosing to go out and deceive and manipulate and take these girls, dress them up to make them look older.
Something else that I read here as well. To dress up to look sexier and older. And I just want to point out to the people that don't know how this case started, it's actually, I don't want to say funny, but it is, because it all started with a high school fight.
Yeah.
I found out reading these files is that, as he said, one of the girls that had an encounter with Epstein goes to her high school in Palm Beach.
Yeah.
And she tells her best friend or another girl that she's getting paid $300 to go and massage this old guy in a Palm Beach mansion. And of course, girls, they can't keep a secret. So the word spreads and they start calling her a prostitute.
Yeah.
The girl finds out and gets into a physical altercation with the girl that called her a prostitute. Her parents are called, the school gets involved. And, why did you call her a prostitute? Oh, because she says she had, she made $300 from this old guy. Let me see your purse. It's all here. The principal's like, let me see your purse.
Yeah.
She finds the $300, calls the parents and say, hey, listen, we have a situation. This is what your daughter's doing. We found the money. And then the story develops from there. There's a phone call, public records request. You could still hear it from the parent when they first call the Palm Beach police to say, this is what I know. My daughter has $300. Apparently she got it from this old guy in Palm Beach.
Exactly.
And the story starts from there.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. And the FBI get involved because it does involve a minor, and under the law in that state and in most states, it doesn't matter if you were deceived, if you were tricked.
Right.
Right.
There's no consent. There's no consent.
Yeah, exactly. So legally, yeah, he was guilty of sleeping, having sex, and prostitution with a minor, and that's exactly what he was found guilty of. He was sent to prison but obviously he had day release on certain things. So there were mitigating circumstances in the fact that, like you say, these girls had admitted that they lied, and their recruiter had made them lie, told them to lie. Virginia she began all of this, and one of her victims, her boyfriend, her ex-boyfriend, Tony Figueroa, is mentioned throughout the Epstein files in court documents, etc., etc. He's been deposed. He openly talks quite casually how he and Virginia would find these girls. Now, he's admitting that whilst they were over age and whilst they were legal adults, that they trafficked people, trafficked children and recruited children. But the media don't care about that. The police don't care about that. It's really weird in that the people who are falsely accused of trafficking are in prison and being demonized and screamed. But the people who are on television saying, I trafficked children, and Virginia called it easy commission, they were paid money and turned into heroes. There's no logic in any of this.
Right.
There's no logic at all.
I also read that Virginia, even I think some media outlets admit that Virginia was a prostitute, a child prostitute, prior to meeting Jeffrey Epstein. This was, she was kind of like a troubled child and somehow found herself in the streets. And she had been living with an older guy here in Miami, actually, from what I read. Yeah. And, fast forward, she ends up working with her dad at Mar-a-Lago, which is where she meets Ghislaine Maxwell. And that's another lie that she said. She said that she met Ghislaine when she was, I think, like 14 or something younger. It turns out that she met her at 17. And this came out in her deposition.
She even said that she celebrated her 16th birthday, didn't she, on the island, and that they were blowing out candles, sweet 16, etc.
Right.
And then you were 17, so it's not possible. Yeah.
Right. So exactly. So that's another lie that was actually debunked in the deposition, and which they didn't even use her as a witness against Ghislaine because she had lied so much that the feds basically said she's not a reliable source or she's going to mess up on the stand. Yeah. But throughout that deposition, she had to basically confess that she had lied about the age where she met Ghislaine and Jeffrey for the first time because Mar-a-Lago records showed a different age. She was employed later, probably like 15 or 16 or something like that.
Yeah. Before she ever met Jeffrey Epstein, she had been called by a judge. So she was described by a judge as a witness who lacked any credibility. She accused two young men of rape, Josh and Kevin.
Right. I read that too.
Yeah. And then that was thrown out. Yeah. And before that, there are police reports showing another incident that she claims to have been raped, and yet it transpired that she was engaging in oral sex with someone on a front lawn. So it's just baffling, really. I can't get my head around why the media. Well, I can, because the Me Too movement stopped journalists from being able to tell the truth, and also journalists saw this as a moneymaker. The lie was more sellable than the truth, and so they blew it out of proportion. And then obviously Virginia, years later, after that incident that you've just talked about, so Sage Gonzalez is the girl who got into the fight. And after that happened, he settled, he paid her money, he paid the other girl money, because he put hands up. I didn't know that they were underage, but I accept it's illegal. I feel sorry for you, etc., etc. Here's some money. And because he wanted to make it all go away, he was quite arrogant. And it would have ended there, really. It would have completely stopped there. And then years and years later, Virginia Giuffre decides to jump on this QAnon Pizzagate bandwagon, and then also sees that some of the original victims. So from that incident, it wasn't just those two girls who Haley Robson recruited. There were other girls who were underage, and she said, lie about your ages. So there were a few others. They came forward. Virginia saw that they were getting money. The FBI stupidly sent a letter to Virginia and said, we've highlighted that you may have been a victim. And so she launched a lawsuit. And in that lawsuit, it mentioned Prince Andrew. It said that she'd been trafficked to foreign presidents. Yet later on, under oath, she admitted she'd never met a foreign president in her life. But as soon as they saw that name, Prince Andrew, then Sharon Churcher, the journalist from the Mail on Sunday, contacted her, said, can you prove it? She said, here's a photograph. But she said, I didn't have sex with him. And it's recorded in the original article. Virginia said, I did not have sex with Prince Andrew. And then Sharon Churcher starts talking to her, says, let's get you a book deal, pays her $160,000 for the photograph in this article, then starts getting her to milk her story. Says, name Alan Dershowitz, he's a good name for your book, name this person, etc. Virginia then decides to go full pelt with this and name every person she can think of. Paris Hilton's father,
yes,
everyone she can think of. A second prince.
Heidi Klum had to come out with that statement and say, I was never on the plane, I was never on the island. I mean, she was accusing men and women.
Yeah.
I know we jumped to the Prince Andrew stuff, but I don't know if that was before or after. This story had kind of died down, right? Because they say that Epstein got a sweetheart deal. The reality is that the women didn't want to cooperate with the investigators, and the women were the first ones to tell Epstein that they were being interrogated. Well, how do I know that? Again, it's on the files.
Yeah.
One of the girls that says, I love Jeffrey Epstein. I would never want to, they were, some of them were getting cars. Some of them, the older ones, were their college tuition was being paid. I'm talking about the ones that, were already over age. They had apartments that he was paying for them. So they had a good thing going on, at least we're talking about the women that are over age. Yeah. So they were like, they alerted Epstein.
They had a sugar daddy.
They had a sugar daddy. And they alerted Epstein that the feds were asking questions, which is why they really couldn't incriminate him that much from these testimonies, right? The cops can only, and I've been part of like some cases before, like here we had a situation with the vandalism with Antifa, and it's like, I remember one time talking to the feds and they say, well, if there's no victim, there's no crime. Meaning that if you don't see yourself as a victim, even, it's different from the underage because they can't consent, right? But all that to say that it's not that it was a sweetheart deal, it's that the women didn't want to cooperate, and all they had was their testimony. And their testimony was that it was willingly, that they lied about their age, that he didn't know at all, that they were told what to do, that they kept coming back for years. I mean, some of them literally, like you could say, grew up with Epstein. Like they were with him from 15 to 18. They weren't chained to a bed or in a room, trapped inside or kidnapped. They would go and come back. They would, some of them said, oh, did you, we would go and have dinner. Sometimes nothing would happen. We were just all having dinner and like hanging out in the pool. It's hard. I know people would not like this, but it's hard for prosecutors and the feds and the cops to like give them more charges when you have chicks saying like, no, I love Epstein and I don't want him to get in trouble. And that's what it's known as the sweetheart deal.
Yeah, exactly. No, you're spot on. And then it did die down because there wasn't really much else to go for. But what kicked it all back up again was the Prince Andrew story. Because so there were two things. First, the Prince Andrew story, then Donald Trump standing to be president. But with regards to the Prince Andrew stuff, like I said, at first it clearly stated she did not have sex with him. Then suddenly the heat was on Prince Andrew. They'd been gunning for Andrew for years, the press. They haven't liked him. They've never liked him. And he has made some stupid mistakes in the past, like financial dealings and stuff. So they really wanted some scandal there. And the massive focus was on Prince Andrew. And then obviously it is his connection to Jeffrey Epstein. And so Jeffrey Epstein suddenly is back in the focus again. Some of these people more come forward. Lawyers think we can get some money out of this. We can launch new lawsuits, etc. And then it just all blew out of proportion. Originally, Virginia, and you probably know this, so she claims that she'd been trafficked to him to New Mexico, and then later on, so she writes in detail, vivid detail, about this long weekend
New Mexico ranch, right?
Yeah, exactly, Jeffrey Zorro Ranch in New Mexico, in Santa Fe, and then later on admitted it didn't happen, and people didn't bat an eyelid, and yet still just 2 weeks ago, the Daily Mirror, which is supposed to be, I've written for the Daily Mirror in the past. It's supposed to be was always a trusted newspaper. They're putting out this headline: "New revelation: Prince Andrew slept with Virginia Giuffre in New Mexico." And what they're intentionally not doing in that article is, one, telling this isn't a new revelation, and second, most importantly, that Virginia admitted that it isn't true. It didn't happen. So then she said that she had an orgy on Epstein's island. I hope you can get this on YouTube because we're talking about some crazy stuff.
Really? I
hope they're not going to censor you. But no, they're talking about group sex on Epstein's island, and yet originally in her original memoir, because people forget this, what isn't her first memoir. In her first memoir, she clearly wrote that this group sex didn't involve Prince Andrew; it involved Jean-Luc Brunel. So she just swapped him later on and popped Andrew back in. So it's riddled with inaccuracy and complete lies. She's just nothing but a false accuser, and even worse, a child trafficker.
Mm-hmm. Look at what she did to Alan Dershowitz. And people may say, "Oh, he looks like a pedophile." Listen, this is not about. We don't go by he looks like a murderer. He looks like a pedophile. We don't do that, and it's very easy. I feel for the general public, for someone who doesn't have a presence, who doesn't have a brand, who's not well known, who's not a public figure, to say who cares. But like, these are people's lives. These are people's reputations.
Exactly.
And it doesn't matter whether it's a poor person or a rich person or Prince Andrew or a commoner. You don't accuse people of false things, much less when it comes to rape, sexual abuse, prostitution, trafficking. And Alan Dershowitz, he's the one that fought back the most. When Virginia accused them of raping her or whatever it was, he said, he even told the FBI, "I'll give you everything. Like, you can have all my data. You can look at my call logs, my flight logs, where I was when she says." And after he decided to countersue her and say, "I'm going to get you for defamation," she drops it and says, "Oops, I made a mistake." I mean, who the F makes a mistake about rape?
It's complete. Some people are trying to excuse it and saying, "Well, some victims have false memories." It's complete.
No,
rubbish. They're saying that it's down to trauma. That it's complete, like that she got mistaken. Yeah, in her new book, she says that you never forget the face of the person that you've been raped by.
Right.
So, and that transpired because of Sharon Churcher, the journalist. She should be sued to hell, this journalist.
Yeah.
So she sent her this email and said, "Don't forget to mention Alan Dershowitz. We think that he's a child abuser. There's no evidence of that, but
and there's emails to prove that, because I've seen those emails.
All those emails have been released. And Dershowitz, in my book, there's some new evidence from Dershowitz that hasn't been released yet. So Dershowitz actually recorded David Boies, secretly recorded him during their phone conversations. And David Boies admits that his client Virginia was completely wrong and lied, etc.
That's her lawyer, right?
That's her own lawyer, David Boyce. And so they knew that this was a lie, but they were pressuring him. They said to Alan Dershowitz, we know that it's wrong, but it's easier for you to just pay this money and then you won't be smeared in the press. Now, that's horrific. That's blackmail. It's extortion. That's exactly what it is. And so it was some extortion plot, but they knew that they could go to these. First, they went to, so now they're only focusing on institutions because they know that these institutions, so the monarchy and banks to them, when they pay sometimes billions in dollars in fines every year, paying off 100 million to these things to make this go away is nothing. So they only focus on them now, but they made a massive mistake with Alan Dershowitz in that he wasn't going to stand out. Originally, though, she wrote in her book, so ignore this new book. It was written by a ghostwriter. Look at her first book, The Billionaire's Playboy Club. And this was solely Yeah, this was solely written by Virginia, The Billionaire's Playboy Club. She wrote this book because she was paid money by Sharon Churcher. Sharon Churcher said, write a book, I'll put you in touch with a literary agent and we'll get it published and serialized, because then Sharon Churcher would earn money, the journalist, and then so would Virginia. And in her book, she clearly states she claims to have met Alan Dershowitz, but doesn't mention she had any sex with him whatsoever. And then later on during this Netflix cut, suddenly, and a lawsuit, she lists all these names, foreign presidents that she demonstrably never met, and Alan Dershowitz, Prince Andrew, etc. And so Alan Dershowitz, yeah, you're completely right. He had his card statements, he had travel documents, he had records, and he was not going to back down. And Virginia could never go into a courtroom, never, because if she's deposed under oath on that witness stand and being cross-examined, she would just be torn to shreds. Because I produced that 200-page report. That report has been used in the lawsuit by Rena Rowe. So Rena Rowe is one of her. So Rena Rowe went to Jeffrey Epstein, was introduced by another woman. She was overage. She was in her 20s, and said, this guy will pay for your tuition, etc. And he's going to be a sugar daddy, essentially. And so later on, Virginia made an accusation against Rena that Rena had sexually assaulted her, but Rena could prove that this was a complete lie. And so she sued her. And so the lawyers used, when they were questioning Virginia in this deposition that no one's seen yet, they would use my report to go through, because it does contain, and that's exactly what would have happened if Virginia had stepped into the courtroom. They would have just grilled her and destroyed her, because she's not a credible witness. So they knew they could never get her into a courtroom. And there's reason to believe that contributed to some extent. There were other factors, but to her suicide. And it is a tragedy.
You think she's dead?
I don't know. I know there's different theories. I have no idea. Like I don't want to start off this whole.
Right. I hate.
I am looking into it. Yeah, I am looking
that row, but it was just so weird after she said that she had gotten into this accident, which proven to be false. After, all the lies that she said, and she's in a fight with her ex-husband and the custody, and it was just, and then she's dead.
Well, suddenly, so she lost custody of her children. And so that tells you something. That never happens. That is so.
That never happens. Women never lose in court. They have batshit crazy to lose in court.
Exactly. It just never happens.
Never.
And so she definitely did something terrible to her husband and showed behavior that worried the hell out of the judge and child protection, so that she lost custody of her kids. So she'd lost custody of her kids. She was also worried that she was going to lose the money that she'd got from Prince Andrew, etc., because she was being sued by by Rena Rowe, and she was going to have to step into a courtroom, because shortly before she died, she lost her kids, her marriage was broken down, she's getting a divorce, and then suddenly a judge declared. So her lawyers are trying to stop her being pulled into a courtroom because they know that she'll be destroyed. And yet a judge had ruled, I think it's about 2 weeks before she committed suicide, that no, you do have to come into court and you will be cross-examined for the first time under oath. And whereas before, so in the certain things, if she lies in a courtroom, and then we can prove that she's lied, she can go to prison, she can be prosecuted, she can be fined, and then it would be all over the front page news and her life's ruined. So she could not go into a witness stand. So there's so many pressures against her. I think she probably did commit suicide, but I am looking into it. I like to explore all possibilities.
All possibilities.
Yeah. Right. And look into it. But yeah, that's what happened.
Can you elaborate, first, what are you, in your new book, what's the name of it?
So it's Naked Lies, a bit of a salacious title. Naked Lies, the Epstein scandal that rocked the royals, because it did, obviously, it's really decimated our monarchy at the moment.
Right. And what do you focus on, or what is the book about?
The book is about the whole case.
The entire thing.
The entire case. So, but it really heavily focuses on Giuffre. So it's a 5-year, almost 6-year investigation. Mm-hmm. It includes completely new evidence, some new evidence about Ghislaine Maxwell. It interviews some of the accusers, most of the key witnesses, and collects quite a lot of evidence. Some of it I can't really say now. That I've also interviewed some of Virginia's victims, and Carolyn Andriano was really a victim, and I interviewed Carolyn Andriano's mother, who revealed a hell of a lot as well, that impacts the case of Ghislaine Maxwell. So some of my evidence is being used in her habeas corpus now.
Which, by the way, a lot of my followers, when I was posting about what a sham this was, and everything, and the lies about Virginia, and I want to focus a little bit on Prince Andrew, because the only proof, which is not even proof of sexual assault or even sleeping with somebody, is that famous picture of him with Virginia and Ghislaine Maxwell in the back, which I believe is a fake picture. And this is something that Lady Victoria, who's Andrew's, ex-girlfriend from like the 90s or something, has been saying for a very long time. She even went as far as actually going into Ghislaine's apartment in London. I think this happened in London, right?
Yeah.
To prove that the height and like the weight, like just to prove that it was a fake picture created by Virginia, I think Maria Farmer, and someone else, a third woman, I think. And you can still find articles about this. When Virginia was asked about the original picture, she said she couldn't find it, which is very odd. Now, this is what brought down the British monarchy, right? Even till today, until now. And Prince Andrew has never been in court. He's still suffering the consequences of this hoax.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so Prince Andrew...
So there is no picture.
Yeah, no. So with regards to the picture, she claimed that she didn't know where it was, but then she admitted that it was at a nephew's house in a box somewhere, and then she claimed that it was too expensive to have shipped over, bearing in mind that by this time she was a multimillionaire. I think she can afford FedEx to send her a box from one state to the other state.
Right, that's what she said. In her box of things lost somewhere. I mean, come on, give me a break. Like a bold thing,
Yeah, but I go by exactly what she said at the beginning, that she didn't have sex with Prince Andrew, that she wanted a photograph she just met a prince, and she's smiling, beaming in this photograph. Now she claims that this photograph was taken after she was raped. Well, I don't think so. Who the hell poses with their rapist beaming and smiling? And it doesn't happen. It's not it's completely illogical.
Can we also just be real for a moment? There are so many women that would just want to have sex with Prince Andrew because he's a prince.
Yeah, they can say I had sex with a prince. Yeah, definitely. And
like there were so many articles, there still is, that you can find from like the early 2000s and before this stuff, which was like, women throw themselves at Andrew. Like he was known as like this playboy prince, and then there were so many women that were just throwing themselves at him because he was a prince.
Yeah.
And I know that victims of sexual assault don't like when you say this, but he just really doesn't have the mode. In my opinion, someone like him, a prince, doesn't really need to rape.
No.
Right.
And let's look at
it. I don't know who this offends.
Yeah, you're completely right. He had we've got this pseudo historian Andrew Lowney in England who just makes up stories to mention because they know they're not going to check it. So in one breath he's saying that Prince Andrew had all these women going after him, and that he had 40 prostitutes, etc. But then at the same time, he's believing Virginia Giuffre. It's complete rubbish. But from a legal perspective, I even say this to people, and then it sort of stops them in their tracks. I'll say, okay, let's pretend that Virginia did have sex with Prince Andrew. She didn't, but let's pretend that she did.
Right.
In the two places where we know that she actually did meet Prince Andrew. And those places are New York, which is corroborated by other witnesses. Although the other witnesses say with the New York event, nothing else took place. But let's just say New York and London, in Kinnerton Street and Ghislaine Maxwell's townhouse. Well, she was 17 at the time. And in New York, the legal age of consent is 17. So that's not illegal. And in England, it's 16. I know that sounds quite bad, but it is. So it's 16.
Right. I've made that argument before. She was.
So the police, they say, why did the police not investigate in England? And why have they said there's no investigation going to take place? Well, it's because there's no law that's been broken. You know, even if her allegations were false, true. Same with the FBI. Why would they look into, just as you said rightly earlier, there's no crime if there's not a victim. Well, then there's also not a crime if there's not a crime. You know, there isn't a crime there. So either way, we've either got a serial liar, which we have, and it didn't happen, or it did happen, but it still wasn't illegal. So why is this such a huge story? It shouldn't be. And people will attack the hell out of me. They'll attack the hell out of you for saying these things. But it's the truth, and it's common sense. It's getting away from this headline-driven sensationalism and mob mentality that's turned all of this into some witch hunt. We don't care about the truth. They don't care. These people don't care about genuine victims of things. There are traffickers out there in reality, real traffickers. And real global trafficking campaigns and networks that we aren't focusing on because we're giving so much attention to this nonsensical hope.
Can I tell you something that I've never told anybody in public before? That I actually know a woman who traveled with Jeffrey Epstein aboard his plane to his island. And I didn't.
Popcorn, one sec.
What?
Let me get some popcorn.
I just recently found out about it. I've known this person for quite a few years. She is now in her mid 40s, like all the women are. Married, children, a beautiful woman, and right up his alley, blonde, and it was actually her son, because I don't know, him and I were discussing something. So, my mom went on the Lolita Express. I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, she met Jeffrey Epstein. She went on his private plane. She went to, Orgy Island. And I was like, holy shit. And, if you ask her, like, how was he? Like, what was, like, you're expecting so much. And she's just like, no, like, he just liked to be around beautiful women, and we were never forced to do anything. It was just like, right now we live in this culture, especially with social media on Instagram, of like these beautiful girls that you see going to Dubai and with, like the red bottoms, and then they're on the private plane with their Hermes bags and like with sugar daddies. It was that, with no social media.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's exactly what it is. Yeah,
really what it was. And then she's like, she doesn't like to talk about it again, because her narrative as someone who was on the island and hung out with Jeffrey Epstein was nothing of what people say that it is.
No, exactly. And the people that I've interviewed who were with him have said that as well, that they didn't see any underage girls, because that was actually a short period of time with these underage girls who were tricked into, he was tricked into seeing. And they say exactly what you said, that it was some of them actually liked his personality, so that he could be funny at times and said he was generous, etc. They all say that he was sleazy and that he did have a sex addiction. It wasn't really a sex addiction. It was we can't go into it on YouTube, obviously, but people can find it.
Because the files describe what he did, which I don't think we can say on here.
I don't want your YouTube channel shut down.
But he wasn't sleeping with them.
No. No.
So, and very recently, when Ghislaine had her thing with the Trump administration, remember there was like a whole recording that came out. She actually said that he had some condition or some heart condition. Did you hear that? That she said
Yeah.
that he really couldn't have that much sex, but so then
Yeah.
he got off like in different ways, which we can't.
Yeah. He would be. There's no way of putting it for Twitter. For YouTube, to dumb it down, he would be a good patient for Viagra. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And so he would have up to 3 massages a day. Massages, erotic massages, whatever you want.
Right. That's what it was. It was erotic massages.
Yeah, exactly. Which is sleazy, but not illegal. There's no difference to Hugh Hefner. Why did we? Why did we celebrate this man? Books have been written, documentaries praising Hugh Hefner. He did the same. Popped a pill and then took a girl up every single night, multiple women, and people thought, "Well, God, he's a cool guy." Well, they would have thought that probably the exact same about Jeffrey Epstein if it weren't for the fact that some of these girls early on had been recruited by Virginia and people who she'd recruited. That's the only reason. And if you take Jeffrey Epstein's story, it's actually, people will be shocked because there's none of this. It's riddled with sex. It is all over the place. But with regards to criminality, it's very minimal. But then when people like Netflix take it, add some sinister music to it, and suddenly you've got a really sinister guy who is evil and it was all planned. Well,
and it's like the Mossad, and they're hiding stuff. And you know what's crazy too in these documents that I read, because this is a grand jury testimony, right? So it's like the testimony of the women, but also the cops and the investigators talking to the grand jury about their findings. And one of the things that they say is that they went through he only had 2 cameras in his West Palm Beach home, one on the outside and one in the living room and one in the pool area or something like that. Yeah. And they went through those cameras, which is how they're able to see that the women were going. But then they went through all this files of him, and they couldn't find any recordings of them having sex or nothing of what these people have said at all. Yeah. Also, the girls never, ever mentioned anyone else being involved at all. Oh, I was, with him, but then Donald Trump came around, or Kevin Spacey, or Bill Clinton. No one else. This was
and the only one who has actually, so Virginia obviously lied about all these people, but was Shantae Davis,
right?
She gave
3 years with him.
Yeah, so exactly.
3 years.
Yeah, exactly. And she wasn't underage at the time either. And
no, she was a 22-year-old escort. Really?
Yeah, exactly. And so she did give Clinton an over-the-body massage, but they posted photographs for it and are laughing as they do it. It's not like really, there's nothing seedy or anything like it. And she went on record and stated, no, he was a gentleman. I just rubbed his shoulders. That was it. And she could have done what some of the others did and said, oh yeah, he did this to me. That photograph proves it. And she could have got a lot of money. But to be fair, so that proves that shows us that she is telling the truth with regards to that. And yet, once again, we go back to, I know we discussed this earlier, but people, they don't care. The majority, sadly, the majority of the general public, they don't care about this case in regards to, they don't care about the victims. They don't care about child trafficking in general. They only want to demonize one side of the political spectrum. The left wing are really hoping that Donald Trump is involved. So they're really pushing for it, release the files. The right wing tend to want, obviously, Democrats to be involved because it's all this Pizzagate and QAnon nonsense. They don't care. They just want, if a list came out tomorrow, which it won't because one doesn't exist. And
who the hell, when you think about it, who's going to sit here and be like, today I lent this 2-year-old, this 5-year-old.
In some diary,
even that to me is so out of touch with reality. Because what they have confused as a list is the phone book, which is in the court records, and it has also been released with the blacked out numbers. And that alone has the phone numbers of everyone, including Clinton. anyone. So, you know, I think even like Paris Hilton, Ivanka Trump wasn't one of them.
He's got every name in there that he could get hold of, because Epstein was renowned for wanting to be snapped with famous people. You know, he got involved with politicians, and they were going to, because you've got a billionaire who's going to fund your campaigns, which is what politicians do. They had no idea that he was going to be involved in, or later on get accused of this.
Right.
They got free flights out of him to campaigns, charities, etc. And potentially they could have got funding from him. So why wouldn't they have done? You know, it is just a case of people. The Epstein client list was promoted by Pizzagate and QAnon when that kicked off, that there was some underground
Jones of the world, like those people.
And then Virginia Giuffre begins tweeting out QAnon slogans on her tweets, saying "Where we go one, we go all," and hashtag QAnon, because she wanted to think, and people latched onto her and said, "Well, we've got someone who can prove that this list exists." Then people put out fake lists, and it just got so thick. So the general public, because nobody has shut this down, they are still waiting. They don't care about the Epstein files, like you rightly say. Most of it has been released now already. Yeah. They are hoping that
a lot of it.
Yeah, huge files. One file alone is over 3,000 pages.
Right. And let me just point out, in a lot of the files, two things. In a lot of the files, some of them came out even during the Biden administration, some of them during the first Trump administration. You have pictures of these girls, the ones that did go to the island, smiling on ATVs, pictures of them in the sunset, smiling on the private plane, smiling, you know, Sarah, I forgot her last name. Sarah what?
Sarah Ransom.
Sarah Ransom, someone who accused both Bill Clinton and Donald Trump of allegedly raping her. She had to once again retract her stuff. There's a famous picture of her with a towel on Epstein's island. Like, I mean, very happy. Are these women that look like they've been beaten and raped over and over again? I mean, they literally went there on their own, and they're smiling, riding ATVs. Are you kidding me? You know, that's one of the things that, you know, I wanted to say. And then the other thing too, for the people that are keeping track of the timeline, because we're talking about a 20-year case.
So hard to keep it all in
years. The reason why this case resurfaced, because this thing kind of like dies down and like it stays lingering within the QAnon groups, Pizzagate stuff, but it really comes back. Like, you know, when he gets arrested again, when we have a suicide, right, in jail, because of Julie Brown from the Miami Herald, because she wanted to keep pursuing these cases because she believed the women that allegedly Trump had raped her at 13 years old. Michael Cernovich, who's, you know, on the right here. And there was a third person that kept pushing for the release. And ultimately, it was Julie Brown and her coverage in the Miami Herald. And she said that it was this whole cover up and the sweetheart deal. And they tried to get Alice Acosta in trouble, who used to work for the prosecutor that, you know, gave the sweetheart deal to Epstein. They, you know, he had to resign from the Trump administration back in like 2018 or 19 because of the scandal that was only pushed forward again thanks to Julie Brown's obsession with trying to take down Trump. And that is something that the Trump base does not understand. The people that are very upset right now that are like, oh, release the Epstein files, 200 have been released, but also you need to understand the source of this. How this all started again was a feminist, right? She also wrote a book. Much of it is fiction, Julie Brown. And she says herself, the tweets are still up, that the reason why she took on this case was because she thought she was going to bring down Trump with the story of the chick that he allegedly raped.
It's politically motivated.
Yeah, it's politically motivated, which is why Trump keeps saying, this is a hoax. It's been used against us, and it still is. You know, and for some reason, people just don't want to believe that. They just think there's a sinister plan, and Kash Patel's covering up.
It's because it's more entertaining. This sounds terrible, but it is because we live in a social media era where, people, to be fair, even without social media, from the dawn of time, people have always been interested in juicy gossip and horror stories, and you know, before we had the Colosseum, go and watch people being like torn down. Now we have newspapers, we have and they can have their names completely shredded and their reputations. We don't want the truth to come up because it's boring. I know that's something we want we would rather hear a lie that is more entertaining than the truth that isn't. And that's quite a bad reflection on humanity, but it's just the truth. And so, and then obviously you've got the political motivations behind it as well. The left, if they came out tomorrow and said, which they won't because it doesn't exist, but if they came out and said there's a list, only one person's name on it is Donald Trump, the right would refuse to accept that. The left would push it to hell. If his name wasn't on there and it was Barack Obama or I don't know, any left wing, pick any Democrat.
Yeah, Clinton's like the number
one. Then come out and say it's a hoax. It's a hoax.
Right.
But because they don't care about this list, they only care about their
journalism.
The people that they don't like are on this mythical list.
Right.
What I find no evidence against Trump whatsoever, because none of them accuse him. There is no evidence against Trump. There's no evidence against Clinton. There just isn't.
Nothing. And more files have been released through the years, and it's just like the hoax keeps falling apart, and it's really the internet people that keep it alive. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, there's a lot of conversation about him being part of Mossad or intelligence agencies. You know, people even like Charlie Kirk, I think was entertaining that before his assassination. Tucker Carlson has said it on stage at Turning Point USA that he believes he is part of Mossad. Obviously, the Israel conversation has also taken over the internet. We can literally blame anything on Israel, right? If you have a bad day, if you anything, we can blame on Israel. Yeah. So it's once again the perfect storm. Well, he was Jewish, right? Jeffrey Epstein is a Jewish Epstein's a Jewish last name. Well, Ghislaine's dad was apparently this high up, in Israel or Mossad. What do you make of all that?
I looked into all of that as well, and with regards to the intelligence, so they claimed that he was recording things to blackmail politicians and that he was working for Mossad. Others say that he was working for different other intelligence agency. There's no evidence whatsoever. The only person who ever said that they possessed tapes of those things, was a guy called John Mark Duggan, who was a former Florida cop. Yeah, I proved, and I add this in the book. He fled to Russia because he said that he was being persecuted. He wasn't. He was a criminal on the run. He was no longer a detective. He completely made up these tapes. They didn't exist. I got him to send me a screenshot of one of them, and he tried his best to cover it up and present it as thing. I used, that's what my background is. I checked into all of it. I did some reverse imaging searches that didn't pull anything up. I did a huge dive, found where this had come from. He'd taken it from a pornography site. It was 2 consensual adults, and it wasn't Jeffrey Epstein. It wasn't this, etc., etc. Then he admitted that he completely lied. With regards to intelligence, there's no evidence that he was using these girls to blackmail people, because where is any of this footage? Why has it not come out? Why would, if Virginia is the only person who claims that she had sex with anyone who would have any intelligence. Prince Andrew, who wouldn't, he only knows about the inner workings of the British establishment, some foreign policy that's about it. But other than Virginia, there's nobody else. So that sort of shoots it down there. There's an infamous photograph now of him wearing an IDF T-shirt in a plane. Well, that was actually bought by Alan Dershowitz for him as a gift, and Alan Dershowitz has confirmed that to me too. He said it was bought for like $10 from a stall when him and Jeffrey Epstein, visited Israel. So to show, and he seemed, Jeffrey Epstein seemed quite excited to be visiting Israel for the first time or whatever. So it showed he didn't really have much connection. I also looked into the Robert Maxwell, so Ghislaine Maxwell's father, and found it's conclusive that he didn't introduce Epstein to Ghislaine or anything. So there isn't actually any proof that he was involved in intelligence whatsoever.
Nothing. I know I keep saying the same thing, but it's like, there's no proof. But when you have voices on the right with massive following and influence, like Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, and many others, it's kind of
Candace Owens will just say any crazy stuff to
anything. And at this point, anyone is Mossad, and again, even going back to like, well, he was collecting blackmail through, video cameras and stuff like that. There was no video camera, at least in the original files. Cops themselves couldn't even find a single camera in any of the rooms.
No, exactly.
It get 2 cameras outside of the rooms, which were more like security cameras for a mansion, like most people would have. So
you're right. Why would it not have shown? Why would it not have shown these girls? The FBI want that evidence. They're not going to hide up that evidence. Hide up the evidence. It's because the evidence doesn't exist. But if we carry on with the timeline, so then you've got obviously Epstein has been found dead in his cell. So I interviewed Mark Epstein, so Jeffrey Epstein's brother. He's convinced that it was murder, so that Jeffrey Epstein was murdered. He is actually carrying out his own investigation now. He's hired some specialists to look into it. But pop that aside. I go into quite in depth in my book about that, and there is different evidence, new evidence surrounding all of that. But then the prosecutors, the government, etc., are really embarrassed because they've allowed this guy to die on suicide or dead. It doesn't matter. The public are outraged. They wanted to see him in a courtroom and being prosecuted. So then they had to move on to someone else. Well, if you look into the police records, the people who did the recruitment, obviously Virginia, etc., the people that would arrange the massages tended to most of the people who I've spoken to said that they would be called by Sarah Kellen. But Sarah Kellen, to her credit, would say, if it was a new girl, is she over 18? That's in the police records too. But they couldn't go after Sarah Kellen because she's not a big name. She's not, people wouldn't be satisfied if they got some random name they'd never heard of and popped her into a courtroom and popped her in prison. They had to still nail someone and use a scapegoat in Jeffrey Epstein's stead. So the best person to go to, the most convenient person, was his ex-girlfriend, who he hadn't actually been together with that long. People don't understand that. But Ghislaine Maxwell, because she was already a famous name, she had a famous father, she had a famous family, and that was a great one for the headlines, and also a good name to prosecute. So she went from being not a person of interest in the case as far as the police were concerned at all, to suddenly being in front of her pictures being you got the prosecutor standing there with a photograph of her and Epstein together, and she's posing for the camera saying, we're going after her, we're going to arrest her. And
she became, I think Jessica Krause has said it best, House and Habit, which is that they needed someone to pin these crimes against. And I think it's been really unfair for her. I mean, I used to judge people that said she freed Ghislaine. I was like, are you guys crazy? That's so messed up. She trafficked children. Why would you say that? Sorry, I don't know why that's going off. Why would you say that? And it turns out that her trial was a sham, and it was in a very corrupt district in New York. They could only pin one charge for this one girl. I forgot the name of the girl right now.
So there were 6 charges in the end. So what she was found guilty of 5, but they all relate to one incident, really. One thing. There was rewordings of the same.
Right. And people are like, well, then how does she get, people are so stupid. They're asking the question of like, well, if she's innocent, why did she get charged? Well, sham trials and jury, we don't have the same system that we have. But besides that, she needs someone needed to go down for this, and that's who they picked.
Exactly.
And which was very revealing to me is when I read these files, right, from the grand jury in the original case, the girls never mentioned Ghislaine as the person who recruited them or introduced them to Epstein, which is what they said she was. In fact, there's 2 assistants that were completely let off the hook of Epstein. They were the ones that would talk to these girls. I forgot their names right now. I think one of them is
Sarah Kellen,
right?
Yeah.
And they were far more involved with the girls, and they're nowhere to be found. They were never charged of anything. They were, I don't know if they were ever questioned, but when you read this and you're like, okay, but where does Ghislaine fit in any of this? And she's just not there.
No, exactly. They didn't go after Ghislaine, and even Epstein didn't consider it when they negotiated this non-prosecution.
Yeah.
So when he was first arrested, he specifically negotiated this non-prosecution agreement, meaning that, okay, I'll go to prison for this, but you're not allowed to go after Sarah Kell and Leslie Groff, and there were Nadia and a couple of others. He didn't mention Gillette. He did say and associates or anyone. He just means people who arrange these massages, who thought they very likely knew what was going on with regards to the sex, but they didn't know that any of these girls were minors, because some of those girls had the ones who were minors had lied that they weren't. And yet he didn't. The fact that she isn't specifically named on there in that protection non-prosecution agreement shows that even Epstein himself didn't think that she would ever be prosecuted, because she wasn't involved in any way. He told that on a recorded telephone conversation when the press first started bringing up her name. He said, "What, why are you going after Ghislaine? She had no involvement in any of this. She's completely innocent." But again, the press had a good name. They had Ghislaine Maxwell. They knew that she'd been friends with Prince Andrew, so she fit into the story perfectly. At her trial, we're talking that this, supposedly people think that this is a massive global trafficking conspiracy with thousands of victims or hundreds or whatever. Well, you only had 2 victims brought forward in that trial because they couldn't find any more. 2 witnesses who were underage at the time that they were trafficked to Jeffrey Epstein. They were, and funnily enough, so one of them was still messaging Jeffrey Epstein while he was in prison, and asking if she could send him sexualized photographs of herself. The other one, who was Carolyn Andriano, wasn't trafficked or recruited by Ghislaine. She was recruited by
Carolyn, yeah,
and yet that buried her. I've got some really key evidence from Carolyn's mother. So Carolyn sadly is no longer with us. She died because Virginia had got her onto drugs. That was part of the grooming process. And later on, years down the line, a few years ago, she was found dead in a hotel room of a drug overdose. And yet before that, 2 weeks before that, she said, "I'm going to sue Virginia, and I'm going to sue the lawyers," because Carolyn claimed that she had been coerced into lying at Ghislaine Maxwell's trial. So that's the only out in my book, the full story behind that. And that's quite explosive as well, because if you got rid of Carolyn from that trial, Ghislaine Maxwell would not have gone to prison. I also found out the victim impact statement. So once someone's found guilty, there are victim impact statements. So the people like Sarah Ransom and Juliet Bryant and Virginia, etc., who weren't in the trial, weren't used as witnesses, were allowed to write how it affected her. The judge then looks at these. It's all emotion driven, and then thinks, okay, I'm going to give her the top sentence or whatever. It's all used to it. But I proved that 2 of those contain completely false information. I interviewed Juliet Bryant, whose testimony, her witness statement, was used to influence her sentence, Ghislaine Maxwell's sentence. In that victim impact statement, she signs it under oath, and her lawyers do too. She clearly states that she saw Ghislaine Maxwell engaging in recruiting on this island, in arranging the sexual encounters, recruiting minors. And yet when I spoke to her and interviewed her, she admitted that she didn't see any of that. That in fact, she was only on the island for a few days. She claims to have seen Ghislaine Maxwell once when Ghislaine Maxwell walked past the kitchen. And that's it. She didn't see any of that. So yet her testimony, in that statement, was used to decide Ghislaine Maxwell's statement. So that's what the family and Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyers are focused on now, is using all of this evidence to show that it wasn't a fair trial, including that 2 jurors hadn't disclosed that they were former victims of abuse. You can't have a juror, one, if you've lied on your application, it should be a mistrial, but also you can't have someone who has experienced the same crime as what the accused is accused of be a juror. They can't decide that because they're biased, obviously. It's the law. You cannot have someone who is biased on the trial or who has been a victim of the crime that is being spoken about in trial, in court. So there are quite a lot of things about that trial that were unfair, not to mention by the time she stepped into that courtroom, the media, without any fact checking, and completely lack of journalism had already branded her as a monster. So she had no chance of getting a fair trial to begin with.
Right. There was a juror that literally lied, and later they caught the Daily Mail had to report of him lying. And there's a question about whether he had ever been sexually abused or something.
Yeah.
I answer no, but you have been, so you lied, and she definitely was like screwed over. With
yeah, and he even admitted that the other jurors were actually in a mind to not believe the witness, and he said, "I'm a abuse victim. You must believe everything that woman says, that girl says, the victim says, the witness. You have to believe it." And he bragged about how he convinced them that they should change their mind, and he changed their mind into going from, okay, maybe she's not guilty, to yeah, she's guilty. And that's definitely a mistrial. Alan Dershowitz has told me that should have been a mistrial. The legal system in America, I should think this happens in England too, but it seems to be very biased against people who have been accused of.
I mean, look, Trump they call him a rapist because this lady accused him 100 years ago of allegedly raping her at Bird Dogs in New York.
Yeah,
they proved that in court, but they still said that he sexually assaulted her in a way or did something. So he wasn't convicted of rape. It was a civil trial, first of all. It wasn't a criminal trial. Yeah. So it's a lot easier to get someone in a very corrupt state district like New York, where they changed the law literally to try to get Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And then he got, I don't know, he got liable for some sexual, don't quote me on it, but it's not rape. But then it was something minor. So they can still say, well,
and that was all political.
Right. We couldn't get him for rape because we couldn't prove it, but we got him for sexually something else. And then he had to pay a $5 million settlement or fine or whatever to this lady that accused him 50 years later. It's insane.
Wrong. It's so wrong. And it makes people scared as well. It makes particularly guys scared. I have even, when I've gone to interview some of these the accusers,
I've
suddenly thought, damn, I want to be in public. I know that sounds sick, because if I annoy them, by I'm going to put this truth out, and if suddenly they turn around, they could just say, oh, he raped me, and we are told that you must believe all women, that you must believe every. They instantly brand them as victims. It's not an accuser. Before, in a legal term, it would have been an accuser, and it would have been, this person alleges that this has taken place. Instantly now, because of the Me Too movement, it is no. If they've said they're a victim, pretty much the same as when someone says, I'm a man, but really it's or I'm a woman, but really it's a man. We have to suddenly believe these things. We have to believe everything that they're telling us. But we shouldn't, because the truth is the truth. We're told to ignore that. Just ignore common sense. Don't look into anything. And if you do criticize these people, you're a victim shamer, or you're shaming them in some way. You're not at all. You're standing up for victims. So my book focuses on there are actual victims that we're not looking into. The falsely accused who have had their lives completely destroyed, who now cannot get jobs, who and not just in this case, but who have been falsely accused of rape or whatever. And then you've got the biggest victims in here, the victims of Virginia Giuffre, the underage girls who she recruited. And yet the press and the public and prosecutors don't care about these victims. Right. And that's so ridiculous. The ones who we can prove they were victims, and yet they don't care about them.
I think part of it's my conspiracy. I would say that I think that when the FBI, back when the case first started, because remember, Virginia ran away with her ex-husband or whatever to Thailand, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Which, by the way, she lied and said that Jeffrey has sent her to Thailand to recruit a girl.
Yeah.
But it is my belief that she did that because she knew what was going to come.
Yeah.
And it was when prosecutors knock on her door, because she said it, that the FBI called her, or they went there. She obviously, this was such a big case involving minors that they called her as a witness to see what she knew. And I think at that moment, it was kind of like a whistleblower deal in a way, or a witness protection deal that's like, you tell us, you help us, and we're not going to prosecute you. And that's what I think happened. I think it was an under the table deal with the American FBI and the Department of Justice, who thought that she would be a good key witness to bring down, whether it was not just Epstein, but Trump, and also the Royal Palace. I also want to clarify to people, because if Andrew was innocent, and why did he fight back? If Andrew was innocent, why did he give up his titles? Why did the Queen do this? Why did he settled? When have you ever seen a member of the royal family in court fighting a defamation case or allegations of sexual assault or rape? That's just not something that Queen Elizabeth was going to allow while she was still alive. During the time when this was happening, I think it was like her Jubilee, right? Yeah. Celebration was coming up. And this was consuming the airways and the press in England and the UK. And it was pretty much because Andrew was going to fight it. He had a legal team. The first thing that the legal team said was, give us the original picture. We need to verify that this is an original. We're going to give it to professionals so they can see whether it's an original or a made up, a Photoshop picture. They couldn't produce that evidence. And Andrew said he was going to fight it here in New York. And, it is the rumor that the palace told him, no, drop it. Give the woman whatever money she wants, and it will just go away. And in fact, it did not go away, because it is the year 2025, almost 2026. And now Andrew is a nobody, a commoner, pretty much stripped of all titles.
What happened with that trial, with that lawsuit? The reason he dropped it was because he couldn't go forward with it, because they were extorting him through the media. So David Boyes, so at one point, if you're accused of doing something like that, how do you prove that you did not have sex with this person? It's physically impossible. So if an accusation like that was made against me, I can't prove that. It's impossible, unless I had here's a record showing that on this date I was somewhere else. But so he couldn't do that, but he did have her memoir, and he had the Billionaires Playboy Club, and in that he could prove that she had falsely accused him and made up these stories. But the judge who was presiding over this, who is well documented as being very anti-Trump and knew Trump was loosely associated with Prince Andrew in that circle, and he wanted this story to continue, they submitted this memoir as evidence, and the judge rejected it. He said, you cannot use it in the trial for your defense. Now, I've spoken to Alan Dershowitz, I've spoken to some of the biggest lawyers in the American, and they said that is so ridiculous. That would never happen in any other case, because that is his only defense is physical proof that this girl lied about him. Right. There it is. There's no reason for them to reject that. So he had that. And then at the same time, you had David Boyes, who would go on to Piers Morgan, who would go on to other things and say, if he doesn't pay up, we will depose his children.
Oh, that's right.
That's really messed up. And then would grill his daughters. Who the hell? We can't have no normal person who isn't part of the monarchy would want their daughters or their children to be sat in a dock and then to be asked about the sexual habits and the sex lives and disgusting things by the lawyers, with only so that the lawyers can then feed it to the press and get this on headlines. And so that's what he's saying. If you don't want your daughters, he even mentioned Meghan Markle, that moron. What does she know about this case? Said that we're going to depose Meghan, and it was all blackmail and pressure through the press and him using the media, and at the same time the judge refusing him to submit the only evidence that he could submit. So it was a case of, how I can't win this. He would have gone to this civil lawsuit, not a criminal lawsuit again, and he wouldn't have been. All he could have said was, I didn't do it. I saw her once, maybe, I don't remember, she had a photograph taken with me, maybe, but I definitely didn't have sex with her. Whilst their case would be, go into really salacious stuff. And it would drag other members of the royal family. It would have gone through the Jubilee time period, and that would have dominated the headlines. And so they just couldn't have it. So they settled. Now the money part of it went into Virginia's charity, which I've been looking into.
Oh my God, yet another lie. She has done nothing with that charity. There's no trace of ever she got millions of dollars from the royal palace for allegedly she's gonna fight human trafficking, and it turns out that it was just, I don't want to say this, allegedly money laundering money to herself for her self-interest.
And her
Nothing.
lawyers are, one of them's a director of the charity. It's registered to his legal team's address, his head office. And David Boyes is an associate of it. I suspect, and I can't prove this, but because I've been trying to get it all revealed, they've never released any form of transparency. I suspect that it was used to launder this money, the payouts, all this compensation, and not just that, from all these donations and things, and to pay out lawyers, because it was set up as a charity, and then they wouldn't have to pay tax. They could just pay it as wages, tax-free wages, etc. And they lost that tax-exempt status because even the IRS said, well, you're not a charity, you've not filed any tax returns, you've not done the right documents, and you don't know where your money's going. And today we don't know where that money's gone. I even proved that one of the directors that they listed was listed without her knowledge. She didn't know that she was. They fraudulently listed some director without them knowing. So what the hell was going on? And we don't know, because no one will look into it. The IRS, I put requests in, but they will not return it. They won't investigate. If I set up a company and I had millions of dollars coming into it and I filed no tax returns at all, the next day I would have a knock on my door asking, where is this money? And if you don't show us, we're going to send you to prison, or you're going to pay this fine. Excuse me. But here we have a charity that has received money from Prince of England, from the monarchy, from numerous people from all over the world, and from who else we don't know. And it hasn't paid taxes. It hasn't done any returns. It hasn't filed properly. We don't know anything about it. And the IRS are shrugging their shoulders at it because, again, they don't want to be seen as attacking these victims.
Right. Well, Jay, plug in, your, where can we find your book? Where
so you can find it
your socials, and I know you have a Substack which has a lot of this information. If you can share with my followers so they can start looking into all this.
Yeah, definitely. So the Substack was set up recently because I can't get, whereas before any other crime I could get an article in the newspaper, I can't get any of this truth into any newspaper.
No one's going to want to publish that.
No, exactly. And so I started to do the Substack only in the build up to the book. There's a lot of, all of these exclusive interviews are going to be on the Substack. So probably joining up is the best for now. And I'll be putting some chapters on there, the initial chapters of the book, just as like a teaser. Even the first chapter will shock people. And the book I will announce that nearer the time, but it will be at towards the end of this month. That it will be coming out. But in the meantime, keep an eye on Substack. I think it's, like I said, it was only set a couple of weeks. I think so, at Jay Beecher. And
I'll put it in the link of this video.
Yeah, I'll send you the link. Yeah, no, that'd be great. Thank you. And I'm only interested in getting this story out, just exactly as you are. You're doing a great job. We just want to get the story out, and we know that what's being printed is a complete fabrication.
We're fighting against a giant because like I said, when you have people with millions of followers like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson and others, people at InfoWars who don't want to report the truth because the Epstein name gives you views and clicks and clout. And there's t-shirts that they sell, there's mugs and merch and all sorts of things. And, they're monetizing from this. And they say they care about victims and children and women. They don't. They care about money. That's the truth. Yeah. Exactly. People like you and I are a minority. We're definitely not preferred in the public eye. We're definitely not the ones that are going to be put on Fox News or MSNBC or Washington Post or the New York Times with this is the truth about Virginia, especially after she died. They've kind of made her into this hero.
She's a saint now.
I personally don't care. I'd rather have these records for history, even if people after us consume it and say, let me also look into this and fact check them and verify that what they're saying is true.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much.
No, thank you. It all boils down to the funny thing. It's not funny, but me and you and very few people, I don't really know many other people. You know, Jessica Krause doing a great job. You're doing a great job. But what we're doing, me, you, Jessica, etc., we're not victim shaming. We're actually standing up for victims. We're trying to expose the real trafficking that went on with Virginia, and we're just trying to stand up for the truth. That is it. You could have gone down the route that most people have done, 99% of people, and just produced clickbait about this whole story to get clicks and attention and added to this like whole maelstrom of nonsense. But you haven't. So I applaud you for that. You're doing a great job. And I'll keep you updated, and obviously we'll stay in touch and go from there.
Guys, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe this video so we can get more views. And thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you next time.